Chapter 6. God's Lessons and Plans. The stone walls of the old temple whitened among the magnificent crowns of trees so harmoniously, as if they were not man-made, but created by nature itself. Away from the tourist trails and civilization, the air was so clean and fresh that a person accustomed to the pollution of the city felt a little dizzy. But the mind, on the contrary, cleared up in a wonderful way. The pressing challenges that had seemed intractable a few days ago now seemed far-fetched and insignificant. The temple of the guardian of knowledge, lost among the majestic mountains, seemed small at first glance, though it had room for more than 100 people. Today, it was filled to capacity. The spiritual conversation gathered so many students that not even a few meters of space was left. The conversation was lively and relaxed, though very deep and serious subjects were brought about. The sage spoke about many things with a smile and lightness, often joking, and his look was filled with kindness, sparkling laughter, and at the same time calmness and harmony, a flickering inner light and deep, boundless love. The students sensed this energy and were on the same wavelength, seeking to support each other to advance together on the spiritual path. Today, they discussed the lessons of God. This important and difficult topic raised many questions, and each answer of the guardian helped to combine fragmentary knowledge into a volumetric picture, helping each student to understand the true meaning of human existence on earth. Beloved guardian, can you please tell us how to understand the lessons of God? Asked an elegant young woman with curly brown hair. She lowered her eyes for a moment, then looked at the sage again from under her long lashes, and added, "When things happen in my life, it is not at all clear what God wants to teach. For example, once when I was on vacation by the sea, I stepped on a big sea urchin. It hurt me to tears, my foot swelled up, and I couldn't walk properly for days. The vacation was spoiled. But I never understood, why did it happen to me? What had I done wrong? Why did God give me this lesson?" The guardian of knowledge listened to the student's question and began to explain. "Victoria, in every situation you have to think first of all, what is the point of this experience? Well, a sea urchin situation happened. What could that mean? Why did you step on it?" The master paused and looked at the woman carefully. "Maybe this wouldn't have happened if you had been more careful. Do you mean that this is God's way of warning me to think about my safety? If something like this happened, it means the person was in a careless state. They made no effort to keep themselves safe, made no consideration. They should have known something in advance about the sea they were going to swim in. What was there? Sea urchins, poisonous jellyfish, snakes? If the person had been cautious, they would have known that there were many urchins in that sea, that it was necessary to enter it with special water shoes and to look carefully where they stepped, so as not to stumble on them. Understanding flashed in the student's eyes, but immediately new questions arose in her mind. "Beloved Master, what is the proper response here? If such a situation happened, what should be done so that this lesson of God would bring maximum benefit? If a person has stepped on a sea urchin, they should thank God by saying, 'It is good that you are awakening me. Finally, this urchin has brought me out of my careless state.' This situation happened, and then questions instantly arose for the master. It turns out that God made them think about the meaning of life. Only then will the person begin to develop and use the lesson given to them for good. The situation appeared. The person reconsidered everything. I was in a careless, inconsiderate state. So, this has to be dealt with. I must be grateful." The master explained that every difficult situation teaches us, helps us to develop. And if the person has not realized this, continues to be careless, and does not think why they step on a sea urchin, that they could get a lot of wisdom from it, then it is not good. Then they learned nothing from the situation and made no conclusions. "Can God be awakening us through these situations?" Victoria asked. "That's right," the guardian confirmed. "They happen for a reason, and a person usually either brushes them off and forgets about them quickly, or begins to resent the sea urchins and the situations. Typically, a person falls into resentment, self-pity, any other state, but not into the state of wanting to understand and comprehend what happened. Why exactly did I step on it? What went wrong? Why did it happen? Why is everything in life like this, with urchins, mosquitoes, horseflies, and houseflies that sting us? It's all for a reason. Why did God create mosquitoes? If there were no mosquitoes, life would be wonderful. So even mosquitoes can wake us up? The student was astonished. Yes, a mosquito bite can wake us up from sleep sometimes, the sage answered unequivocally. God created mosquitoes for this purpose. For example, we were in a sick imagination, completely asleep in that state, identified with our false personalities. And then a mosquito suddenly flies in, and we start to wake up, because we have to chase this mosquito away somehow. To do this, we have to be closer to reality, to stop being in illusions and hallucinations. This is why God created many such urchins, mosquitoes, and other unpleasant things in the world, so that each of them would make us think, wake up, and start working on ourselves. If that's true, does that mean we should use every moment to develop? Victoria asked again, continuing the thread of spiritual conversation. After all, such small troubles are waiting for us at every step. Indeed, one must use every situation for development and spiritual growth, the sage affirmed, although usually it does not happen, because otherwise one would have been enlightened long ago. More often than not, a person simply brushes the situation aside, gets offended, and does not think about the purpose of the situation, does not want to work on oneself. This means that again, one doesn't see oneself, one's mistakes and shortcomings. One does not understand what one needs to change in oneself, what state one needs to be in, so that there are no more of these conditional sea urchins. If one thought like that, if one used every situation for growth, then one would develop very quickly. When the master had finished, a wiry young man with sharp facial features and impetuous movements raised his hand. Master, do I understand correctly that the situation right at the moment of your reaction shows what is wrong with you? If you are angry, resentful, and complaining to God, then He is giving a negative situation to punish you for wrong behavior? The sage shook his head. No, Anton. God is not trying to punish anyone. That's the wrong idea. He is not punitive, but instructive. He wants to teach us, you see? The sage looked shrewdly at the student and began to explain patiently. God loves the whole world and every person. How can He seek to punish them? He seeks to teach them, to make them better, but it cannot be done without bruising them. That's why He has to create difficulties for them, but God does it by loving them. Not out of a state of, why have you sinned? How dare you? Here I am going to punish you. But from another, oh, the poor person, they are still in ignorance. They don't understand that they have to evolve and become enlightened. Now I will send them a situation so that they will understand. Let them stop identifying themselves, stop digging themselves into the trenches of worldly life. Let them begin to think about the meaning of life. So, if God didn't send troubles to a person, the person would never think about the meaning of life? Anton asked, looking at the sage questioningly. Of course, the master gently replied. If there were no suffering, no one would think about the meaning of life. Everyone would just enjoy it. Why think about it when everything is fine the way it is? Why use the situation as a practice when everything is fine the way it is? Then, suddenly, something bad happens, and the person thinks, why is life like this? What's the meaning of it? Why do these troubles happen? As long as they were having a good time, they didn't think about it. But when it got bad, they immediately started thinking, is there a God? If God exists, why does He allow all this to happen? Where does all the trouble come from? Maybe the world isn't what I think it is. Maybe I'm wrong. This suffering makes them think. It makes them look for the meaning of life. The master finished, stood up from his seat, and walked across the stage, looking at everyone in the audience. A slight hum swept through the rows of students. Many were talking to one another, sharing emotions and realizations that were happening right here and now. After a long pause, the sage allowed another portion of knowledge to settle in their heads and gestured to a raised hand. It was the hand of a round-faced, short woman with thin lips and reddish curls that poked out from under a yellow bandana. "Beloved guardian, I wanted to ask about God's plans," she began. "For example, when God decides to incarnate a soul on earth, it is placed in the body of a newborn baby. I always thought that abortion was bad, that it violated God's plans. But I recently read a book, and it says that we have the right to decide whether to have an abortion or not," the woman said as she spread her hands apart, showing her bewilderment. "In this case, what happens to God's plans?" The sage looked at his student with a bright smile, saying without words that he understood her question and knew the answer, which was very simple and clear. "Zlata, if someone is destined to come into the world, they will come anyway," said the guardian of knowledge. "Think of what happens when a dead child is born, when it dies immediately in childbirth or in early childhood. What happens in that case?" The sage addressed this question to all the students in the hall, encouraging them to ponder the answer on their own. There was a brief silence for a moment, and then a slight buzzing sound spread among the students. "The child is put into another body?" Zlata suggested, choosing the most logical solution she could think of. "Yes," the sage confirmed confidently. "It is reborn again, almost immediately. Its soul goes to incarnation anyway. If it does not succeed in one body, it will be reincarnated somewhere else for sure. It will be given the destiny that God has planned for it. For example, if a person should meet a master, go through some tests, or receive some rewards, it will happen anyway. Whether an abortion is made or a dead baby is born, the soul is immediately placed in another womb that is suitable for it. So many people on the planet give birth at almost the same time, so a new womb is found very quickly, and the soul is placed in the child's body the moment it is born." As he finished, the sage pointed with his open palm toward a raised hand. The student who was going to ask the question was a sturdy man with large features and expressive brown eyes. "Master, I'd like to add to the subject of what you were just talking about," he began, respectfully bowing his head. "India is overpopulated right now, and yet they do not want to control the birth rate. On the contrary, they follow the idea that abortions and birth control should be forbidden, so that a woman is always pregnant, so that she will give birth until her body is completely broken by these births." The man grinned mirthlessly. There was a hint of condemnation and indignation in his voice. "And yet they believe in the reincarnation of souls and justify overpopulation. For example, they believe that Rabindranath Tagore should be reborn. But as he was the 13th child in the family, they think that if they make it like in China, where one family has one child, Tagore's soul will not reincarnate. Master, are they really right?" Before answering, the guardian paused for a moment, and the hall fell silent again. Several dozen pairs of eyes stared intently at the master, waiting for his answer. "No, and that is a very poor excuse for overpopulation," he finally said. Even now, as he stated this unhappy fact, there was no moralizing or condemnation in his voice. He spoke the truth in a way that made the students feel light and at ease. It was as if he was letting them know that all mistakes could be corrected and changed if there is a will. If God had needed Tagore to incarnate, he would surely have sent his soul to earth in some other place, one way or another, and it wouldn't be necessary to wait for a woman to give birth to her 13th child. The master smiled, emphasizing the absurdity of this opinion. If God wants something, he will do it anyway. When Tagore was incarnated, the mortality rate in India was very high. They didn't know how to cure many diseases, and there was a great risk that a child would die at birth or in early childhood. But even assuming it happened then, under these difficult conditions, he would immediately reincarnate in another womb. And now Tagore would certainly have appeared in an earthly incarnation if he were to appear. So this excuse for overpopulation is just an excuse, another illusion. Whom God has destined to incarnate will incarnate in any case. Master, tell me, do the souls want it? a pretty tall young woman with long silver earrings asked. To incarnate here, on the physical plane, the sage shook his head again, and a bright smile touched the edges of his lips. No, Anna, most souls do not want to, he answered. On the contrary, they say with regret, oh, I have to incarnate again. In the subtle plane, they feel good, they are in bliss, and they understand how hard it will be for them. From there, they see how people here suffer. We do not see how angels live, but they see everything perfectly well from there. They think, Mama, don't give birth to me. Have an abortion, Mom. Give me a couple more days here. The master spoke about this complex and rather delicate subject with such ease and such sparkling good cheer that smiles ran through the rows of students. But women don't get it, the sage continued, especially when everyone around them is yelling, have a baby. If there's some health problem, they say, you'll be healthy if you give birth to a child. If there is something wrong with the relationship with the husband, they say, you will give birth and everything will be fine. He will love you more. But in fact, it's a lie. Women give birth, and then their health becomes even worse. Their husbands leave them, and other problems arise. But if you look at it more globally, this is how society justifies the overpopulation of the planet. Through these indoctrinations, stereotypes, and patterns of thinking. But why is this happening? Anna asked with sincere incomprehension. The planet is already overpopulated. Humanity is growing, and soon there will not be enough resources for everyone. Isn't it so? The young woman looked at the guardian inquiringly, waiting for his answer. Yes, he nodded, and then began to confirm the fact. There's a whole island of garbage in the ocean, and it's polluted everywhere. Before, people were able to drink from the tap without any trouble. Now we have to buy it, and soon we will have to buy clean air too. This is what overpopulation leads to. Therefore, if someone has an abortion, it is one's choice. The person has to decide what they want. If one decides to have an abortion, fine. If one chooses to give birth, let them have a baby. Zlata raised her hand again. Master, I also wanted to ask. I often see poor families where a woman has 4 or 5 children. At the same time, parents cannot give them a normal education or even upbringing, and families with a lot of money often have only 1 or 2 children. So it turns out that successful people are more conscious of parenthood? Yes, they are usually more reasonable and conscious when it comes to having children. That's how it should be. A person should think about what they can give to a child. If they have nothing, why should the child live in such conditions? You should think, first I should have something to give to my child, and then I will give birth to a child so that they have everything they need. Parents have to pass on some knowledge to their child, to teach them good, kind, and light things. What if they have nothing of this? Then why do all this? If a person is not educated, what will they teach their child? Many people do not even think that they should teach a child at all, said Zlata. They think that this is the responsibility of schools and teachers. But at school, too, teachers know nothing about life, about what you really need to teach children. There are no normal educational programs, so parents should not rely on the school. Guardian, it would be really so good if the school prepares children for real life, said Zlata emotionally. For example, to teach girls to be selective and to have the right idea about childbirth, to teach them how to build a family, how to communicate with men, how to identify unworthy men. The sage nodded. Yes, it should have been that way. In childhood, and especially later, when a girl turns into a woman and decides to give birth, she should be warned that it will be difficult, that giving birth and raising a child is not easy. But no one talks about this. Everyone just keeps saying, have a baby, have a baby. First of all, we should ask a woman if she wants to give birth. The worst thing is that everything is done just to observe formalities. Everybody gave birth, and I have to. Otherwise, I will be judged for not giving birth to a child. I have to hurry. The guardian vividly and ironically portrayed the thoughts that so often visited the minds of expectant mothers, exaggerating the situation and his words were again met with smiles. I think many people just give birth to be like everyone else, just so people don't judge them and leave them alone, Anna said. That's the way it is with people, the master affirmed. That is why we live a poor life. If one lived thoughtfully, reasonably, one would do things only when one was ready for it. If one understood that now is the time, when one thought over all the pros and cons, weighed everything, found a special good time for it, then everything would be fine, and we would live happily. Does a child need to be born to observe formalities? The sage looked questioningly into the hall, and after a few moments he continued, The child doesn't need it. It wants to come into a good family, to be provided for, to have smart parents who can teach it something good. When a child is born for the sake of appearance, there is none of that. Such families live from paycheck to paycheck, and they cannot give anything to their children. What if they have not 1 but 5 children? But don't people understand that a child is a responsibility? Victoria asked emotionally. How can you have so many children, not knowing how you will provide for your offspring? It makes sense to bring up one child and give it the best of everything. As a rule, such people have no restraining brakes, the sage answered in a calm tone. So they multiply and do not think about the consequences. There are contraceptives, abortions, but it's as if they do not know about it. So the smarter people become, the less they multiply, Anton asked with obvious irony. You could say that, the master affirmed. Higher education postpones reproduction for a later period. By the time a person finishes college, they become more mature and they think, why do I need all this? I'd rather live for myself. Why bother with all this? And they postpone this moment or decide that they won't have a baby at all. For example, Madonna said that first she would make a career, achieve everything, and then give birth. She had her first baby only at the age of 40. More and more stars are doing the same. In general, now in developed countries it is not accepted to have a lot of children, and some people refuse to have them. When the master had finished talking, a curly blonde woman in her 30s or 40s in a blue loose shirt raised her hand. A lightness and a surprising freshness emanated from her appearance. Great guardian, she said, and the sound of her voice rang through the hall with an iridescent chime. You said that girls are not taught to be selective when choosing a partner. Tell me, how to develop it properly? Olga, first of all, a woman should value herself. The sage readily began to explain. Girls often have complexes from childhood, when someone told her that she was something different, curvy, cross-eyed, and ugly. If a boy at school paid attention to her, she is told, Rejoice, he looked at you, but you do not come up to him first. You should not. Let him make the first move. This is how the woman is taught that she has flaws, which means that she has nothing to look forward to. Then the girl becomes a young woman, and some unworthy man approaches her, an alcoholic, a gigolo, a domestic tyrant, and she thinks, okay, I have no choice. I'm ugly. At least he came up. If he also says the 3 magic words, I love you, then she should immediately marry him. But this stereotype is very strong in society, Olga said. You don't come up first, you don't call first. This is indecent. That is also indecent. How do women overcome this? In fact, a woman is deprived of the ability to act on her own due to her indoctrinated attitudes, commented Sage, responding to the student's words. But only when a person acts, they can achieve something good. If they spend their whole life waiting for something, they won't get anything. But if they take action, they will achieve many things. Master, what other wrong attitudes are there in terms of selectivity? Zlata asked. There are a lot of them, answered the guardian. For example, if a woman sees a decent man come up to her and he has a ring on his finger, everyone around says, you can't, he's already taken. Again, a barrier is put up so that a woman can't be with a good man. But is it possible to do that? Anna asked with surprise. Dating a married man? Is that normal? There are different situations, the sage replied calmly. If a decent man is married, it does not mean that he is happy. I do not urge women to take up other women's husbands, but each case must be considered separately. For example, there are many couples where husband and wife live with each other only formally, to conform to the expectations of society. Often they have nothing else in common except children. They continue to agonize all their lives, just to conform to society's expectations, so as not to provoke condemnation from others. The master finished and looked around the room carefully. He stopped at Zlata. Wrong attitudes and programs are all around us, he continued. Here's another example. Often a woman is judged for her bright makeup and beautiful clothes. Parents tell their daughters, "Don't wear makeup, it makes you look older." Do not dress brightly, what will people say? You are not a prostitute, are you? They're the ones who dress brightly. You have to wear gray, unremarkable clothes. But then, it's hard for a woman to attract a decent man, said the student, fixing her yellow bandana. A successful man. He wouldn't even notice a woman if she had no makeup on, or wasn't well groomed, or dressed, or whatever. The sage nodded. There. That's why a normal man can't be attracted. If some alcoholic or gigolo is attracted, a woman thinks she should be with him. Rejoice, hold on to him. Is he beating you up? Does he sell everything out of the house and spend all the money on drinking? Keep your family anyway because your child needs a father. I have an acquaintance who was so patient until she was taken to the hospital with fractures after another domestic scandal, said Zlata with obvious indignation. There was a tense silence for a moment, which was interrupted by the calm, measured voice of the sage. A lot of women endure to the last moment. Why is that? He said, addressing the question to all the students. Because of their stereotypes, said one of the students. Society's attitude, a voice came from the back rows. That's right, said the sage. No one tells women, you're normal, you're a goddess. Look after yourself, put on makeup, dress nicely, and normal men will come up to you. No one says, look, you make the first move toward normal men. Don't wait for someone to make the first step. If someone does come up, it's some man with a low level of subtle energy that nobody wants. No one is setting girls up to think right. Do it yourself. You're worthy of the best man. If these attitudes were given, then everything would be different. Every girl would find herself a worthy man. But as it is, many people live under the power of delusions. For example, many people are afraid to act and ask a man for help or support. At that moment, a gorgeous brown-haired woman raised her hand. Her hair was neatly combed up and gathered in a tight ponytail, and her well-made glasses gleamed in front of her eyes. Beloved guardian of knowledge, how do you overcome your fear of asking men for money? She asked and lowered her eyes, as if embarrassed by her question. Christina, actually this fear comes from our childhood. Our parents instilled it in us. The sage began to explain thoroughly. A little child tried to ask for candy, and he was refused. No way, begging is not good. Only beggars, bad people, gypsies ask for candy. We are good people, we will never ask. We should not do it. That is how a little child's impulse is rejected, and they are already afraid to ask. Then, as an adult, we have this childish fear. We have to realize it, separate it from ourselves, exaggerate the symptoms, and laugh about it. Master, how do you begin? Anna joined in the conversation. It's not easy to overcome what we've been indoctrinated to do for years. First of all, you have to understand where this fear comes from, that it's all childish complexes and compulsions imposed from outside. Remember the moments from your childhood when this indoctrination happened. Come to the realization that it is because of these complexes and insinuations that it is now very difficult to live, that nothing can be said or asked or done. Because of this constant fear, because of this stiffness and constraint, all life goes by. Did you understand it? Okay, so then you have to get angry with yourself and say to yourself, how much more of this can I take? Then make fun of it all and exaggerate it all. Tell me, if you play this situation in a theatrical sketch, will it help? Christina asked again. I mean, to play how it will happen, how I will approach the person, how... The woman hesitated, and it was obvious that she felt a little uncomfortable saying these words. "How I will ask for what I need." The sage encouraged her with his smile. "Yes, it's very good to play out in the theater how to do it correctly, or at least you can imagine it as vividly as possible, with as much detail as possible." "I've tried imagining it," Christina confessed suddenly. "I can't even fathom. It doesn't work." Indeed, looking at this young woman with her tight ponytail of hair, all pulled together and buttoned up, it was hard to imagine her asking anything of anyone. "No one will judge you in your imagination," the master reminded her with a smile. "Why aren't you free in your imagination? Imagine, I go up and start asking a man for something. He gives it to me because I'm in a good state. First try in your imagination, and then in the theater to play out this same scene. Go in front of a mirror, in pairs. You have to tune into the fact that we are free to ask for something from anyone. In the beginning, maybe you ask for some small things. For example, please give me a pen, give me that candy over there, and so on, in order to loosen up somehow. That is, we ask for things that we are not afraid of refusing. That's the worst part." Christina was emotional. "As soon as I think that they refuse me and blame me for the fact that I had the nerve to ask for something at all, I think I just burn with shame." The sage gave the woman an understanding look. "Rejection is nothing to be afraid of," he said softly. "You can even play that you are refused and told to go away. Are you a beggar? Go away. We are not afraid of that. We go on asking in our imagination. For example, like a cat that is being persecuted, but it still crawls in, coaxes, and asks for food. They chase it away, and then it claws again, begs and meows." "Of course," Christina smiled. "It's easy for a cat. Her mother cat didn't instill such complexes." The woman's phrase sounded so comical that some of the students smiled here and there was resounding laughter. "There, good," nodded the sage mischievously. "You are already taking the first steps to exaggerate your fears, to laugh at them. Yes, indeed, the mother cat did not inspire complexes in the kitten, so it can safely get its own food. That's how you should imagine that you get what you want in the end." "Thank you," the woman smiled. "I'll try to do it this way, to imagine it." "You can start with simple situations," the guardian of knowledge reminded, "and then complicate them. For example, imagine that you are told to go away, judged. You are told something unpleasant, but you still react to it calmly, as if nothing has happened. And keep asking, keep going your way. Then we will have the right state, and we can easily communicate with people, ask them something, say something to them, somehow manifest ourselves correctly." The sage paused and spoke again, summing up what he had said. "You see, we have considered so many delusions and stereotypes which prevent us from living, which make us act the way we are compelled to act, and not the way our heart tells us to act. And what are women supposed to do about all these delusions?" Victoria asked, raising her hand again. "When you live in society, you are under a great pressure, and it's hard to get out." "Yes, very hard," the sage affirmed. "But it's possible. The first thing to do is to become aware of all the errors, to throw them out of your head, to exaggerate them, to laugh at them and at yourself, to renounce them, to detach yourself from them, not to think that way about yourself and others. Then start acting properly. Be active. You have to look at everything sensibly, throw away prejudices, reject them, and form correct and strong thoughts. Then all will be well in your life." Saying the last phrase, the guardian smiled warmly, and all the people in the hall felt a wave of light energy coming from him. There was silence in the hall, but it was not oppressive. Rather, it was harmonious and soothing. The students thought about what they had heard today to formulate new questions. Their faces glowed with sincere joy. The students were happy to be here and have an opportunity to touch the vibrating energy of love coming from the Master, to communicate with him and receive concentrated knowledge, to let it flow through themselves and come to realizations. At last the hand of a student went up, ready to ask another question. It was a short, red-haired young woman with attentive brown eyes, which sparkled with intelligence and insight. "Beloved guardian, please tell us," she began in a high, pleasant voice. "We often hear that a person has become enlightened. And how many real enlightened masters are there on earth now?" "Zarina, there are a lot of such enlightened people nowadays," the master confidently answered. "But most of them are just inflating their egos. They want to increase their importance in the eyes of others, improve their self-esteem, and feel good about themselves. So they made up things like, 'I am a prophet, I am Christ, I am enlightened.' They invented an image that pleases their egoism. So they live in illusions and chase that jackalope that exists only in their imagination," Zarina clarified. "Exactly. If they can't behave adequately, if they start looking for that jackalope in reality, they end up in the hospital, and there they are treated for megalomania. The mentally ill used to believe they were Napoleon, Lenin, Stalin. Nowadays, the enlightened ones are in vogue." The master smiled, and playfully lively sparks slipped into his gaze. "The human ego wants to feel great, to declare itself great. In a madhouse, now you can meet a Christ or a Buddha. Once, such an enlightened prophet even met another nutcase who thought he was God during a walk in a mental hospital. Do you know what this alleged God did?" The master looked around with a twinkling look in his eyes and paused for a moment. Started shouting to the whole compound, "He's no prophet. I didn't send him." A wave of laughter swept through the hall. So amusing the situation looked. The sage smiled again as he watched the students' lively reaction. At that moment, a hand flew up abruptly in the hall. It was Anton again. "But guardian, many of these supposedly enlightened ones," he said curtly. "They are not in the hospital, but they feel quite well. They even have some students of their own." "Yes, that happens all the time," the sage confirmed. "If someone can behave adequately while having such a hallucination, they start teaching someone. They gather a bunch of people together and mess with their heads." "How do you know if a person is really enlightened or just wants to appear so?" Christina asked, and the whole room froze, waiting for an answer. "If a person is enlightened, they can give a vivid insight into people's lives," the sage said with confidence. "For example, Osho was capable of this. When we read his books, we can come to an understanding. If such clarity appears in the mind, then we are met with a high level of spirituality, a high level of knowledge. If answers to any questions of life are given, it means that a person has really achieved something. But more often, we see that a person is just shouting, 'I am enlightened,' and when you ask them something, they can't answer anything, or they have the same answer to all questions. Chant the mantra, then you'll understand. Or they give incomprehensible answers, which only confuse. This means that the person doesn't know anything. They don't understand anything. They can't explain anything. Then what kind of an enlightened person is this? If people talk to them and become smarter, understand more, and if their life becomes easier after this understanding, it means that the person really knows a lot, that the person is really awakened." When the guardian finished speaking, Christina said words of gratitude, and again several hands went up wanting to ask questions. The sage gave the floor to someone who had not yet participated in today's talk. She was an older but rather vigorous-looking woman of pleasing stoutness. "Beloved guardian, it is written in the book The Power of Lineage that when Saosh began to communicate in the human language, he began to lose touch with the spirits, with the divine power. I understand that we waste a lot of energy through words. Is that so?" "Of course, Vera," the sage answered unambiguously. "For example, we decided to make a practice. We came to a beautiful place and wanted to just enjoy the landscape, the sea, the rustle of waves. And then we began to have thoughts. 1, 2. So we lost our minds, and we can't see the sea and all this beauty anymore. Why can't we see it?" The master paused for a moment and continued answering his question. "Because thoughts bother us. Our attention is focused on them, How can we see the spirits if our minds are so jumbled? Am I right to understand that a person loses contact with the spirits at the moment when they have an internal dialogue? Anton asked. Yes, that's right. The sage nodded approvingly, confirming his student's hunch. Sausch could see spirits until he had an inner dialogue. And young children all have the ability to see spirits and communicate with angels. But then, once they master the language, all that is lost. Once they start an inner dialogue, they are constantly thinking, constantly in their thoughts. They don't even see what's around them, let alone spirits. They don't see or understand anything. Even if they do see something, they label everything. Master, can you please explain what you mean? Anna asked. What do you mean by labeling? For example, a person comes to the seashore, but they cannot see all of its true beauty because they have labeled it the sea. And that is all. They see only a collective image of the sea. They do not feel its energy. They are distracted all the time. The master looked around the room to see how well he was understood. Or here's another example. A man came up to a woman, said the 3 magic words, "I love you," and the woman immediately labeled him a prince, and she's already starting to behave accordingly. Great one. Tell me, what does one have to do to see the subtle plane? Is it possible to see it at all? Christina asked. It's possible, the sage answered. But if we want to see something, especially to see the subtle plane in spirits, we must cease the inner dialogue, stop the endless hallucinations. If we don't talk inside ourselves all the time, then we will begin to see what really surrounds us. Then our brain will stop labeling everything, and we will see everything for real. Why do you think they say that the first impression of a person is the truest one? The sage looked questioningly at the students, and they were silent as they pondered the answer. It's our emotional center, Zlata finally answered. It gives us the right first impressions of a person. For example, an unworthy man comes up to us, and the emotional center immediately tells us, this is some kind of fool, and negative impressions arise. Zlata finished speaking and looked at the guardian expectantly. Do I understand correctly? Well done, the guardian praised his student. You've got the point exactly. And then this fool says, is your mother looking for a son-in-law? Then we label him at once. We start thinking, oh, maybe he really loves me. Maybe he is a real prince. We just need to look at him closely. The woman starts to indoctrinate herself, to distort her own perception. After all, the emotional center has already suggested that this is a fool. The right reaction had sprung up immediately. But no. Then the woman begins to imagine things that aren't really there, and she already sees some alcoholic as a fairy tale prince. That's what happens. The sage made a long pause, looked around the students with shrewd eyes, and continued. So we must remember that if there is an inner dialogue, there are hallucinations and labels. If we don't trust our heart, that is, the emotional center, then we see nothing. Not only we don't see spirits, but also we don't even really see life. No sea, no clouds, nothing. The inner dialogue and hallucinations that we have are an illness from which we must be treated. Master, are empty conversations also an illness? Christina asked. Yes, the sage confirmed. People meet, and instead of meditating, watching the sunset, they start talking all the time. During the conversation, they see nothing around them and sink into shared hallucinations. Instead of sitting down and being quiet together, they talk about nothing. They could have done it this way. One is silent and the other is silent. They keep silent and are happy that they don't have to play any roles, that they don't have to talk about anything empty. But no, this is not how it is usually done. Now it's a common practice for people to have some meaningless conversations. They have to have them. What are they about? Some nonsense. People recount all their inner dialogue and their hallucinations. It's the same way mental patients in psychiatric hospitals retell the ridiculous bow and screw theory to each other. They make something up and believe it, write it down on sheets, and then tell everyone else that it's genius and start arguing about it. One should be healed from such a state. If they were, They would turn off the dialogue as if with a click of their fingertips and start perceiving everything realistically. They would see spirits, the sea and clouds, and they would understand who really approached them. They would not sugarcoat the fool. They would not label him. Great One, can we just give up our minds? Olga asked. There are many things in the world that require reflection, mental work. It is possible to switch over, the sage answered and snapped his fingers in the air. Shazam, that's it. If we needed to think constructively, we would turn our minds on. We think over, discuss our plans, and then, he snapped his fingers again, we turn our minds off. We sit and meditate. That should be our state. While we hallucinate, while we have an inner dialogue, while we have empty conversations with each other, we see nothing but this. Beloved guardian, I just feel that excessive talking takes away my strength, Olga shared when the sage had finished speaking. I have a friend, and every time I meet her, she starts to immerse me in her problems, constantly complaining about life, about how bad she has it all. Poor health, no job, and no husband, but how she wants to have all that. And how evil everyone around her is. I can't turn away from her, and I would like to support her, but I feel that I myself feel bad from such communication. I get a headache, and I sink into the same state as she does. I get angry and irritable. Can you tell me, please, what to do in such cases? What is the right thing to do? It often happens, the guardian of knowledge began to explain, answering the student's question. This is the way the person steals our attention and starts to become a vampire. If we immerse ourselves in this conversation, then we are immediately drained of energy. We feel how miserable a perception can get, and we feel ourselves getting infected with this misery. What is this conversation about? A person complains, "That one has offended me. The other one didn't understand. I have so-and-so painful things here." They amplify this negativity and start to pass it on to us. You can even become ill if you listen to and let all this pass through yourself. You can enter a negative state. You should remember that negative thoughts and feelings are dangerous. On the contrary, you must think positively. Lord, thank you for giving me these difficulties because I was asleep. I did not want to think about the meaning of life, and time was passing. You gave me these difficulties so that I could begin to awaken. Now I'm thinking that something is wrong. Something needs to be changed. Something needs to be done. Thank you. If that's how a person talks about some difficulties, it means that they are in the right awakened state. If they are just complaining about life and whining, then they are vampiring and start to pass all the negativity to others. Yes, I tried to tell her that, but she was so immersed in that state that she didn't even hear me. In such a case, the easiest thing to do is to stop communicating with the person. If that is impossible, just don't listen to them. Don't involve yourself. Go about your business. The main thing is to stop letting it all pass through you. Master, why does a person behave this way in the first place? Why are they always whining and complaining? Isn't it disgusting for them? Asked Christina with genuine incomprehension. Does this behavior come from childhood? Yes, in most cases, the sage answered. When a person was a child, they thought about how to attract the attention of their parents. The parents were always busy or fighting with each other, and the child wanted to draw their attention. They would start crying, "Oh, I hit my knee. I'm hurt," and feel bad. They paid attention to the child, started pitying and hugging them. And then the child grew up, and this pattern of behavior became firmly established in them. They start complaining about their illnesses, about their bad life, and wait to be pitied, hugged, and comforted. When people do that for this person only continues to whine even more, to get the attention, support, and sympathy of others time after time. What kind of upbringing does a child have to have in order not to form this kind of behavior? Olga asked, supporting the topic. So that the child doesn't grow up to be a whiner? You need to react in the right way. For example, you should say things like, "Why are you whining? Look, everything is fine. Do something useful and important. Why are you concentrating on this nonsense? What's in it for you?" If the person had been brought up that way, they wouldn't have been a whiner, and they would have made it in life all right. Otherwise, they are trying to attract attention by whining so that everyone would gather around them, pity them, and they would feed on this energy. In return, they would pass their negativity onto everyone. That's why you shouldn't react to whining. You mean that you should not try to wake a person up? Vera clarified. You should not explain to them what is going on? You have to see what kind of person this is. If they are already on a spiritual path, seeking something, trying to practice yoga, then it is possible to explain something to them. It's often impossible to explain something to a common person, especially if they are an elderly person. They are always immersed in their problems, and their complaints only make them worse. They get worse and worse. Instead of thinking, what's the matter with me? I'd rather do a laughter meditation, have some laughs, and I'll be good in spite of all these problems. Okay, I did laughter meditation, had some laughs, and started dancing. That's it. A good state of well-being emerged, and half of the problems have already been solved. If the person is able to understand this, then it is necessary to explain how to get out of the unwanted state. How do you do it correctly? Anna asked. What is the best way to tell the person so that they realize this and can change their state for a positive one? You should say the following. If you enter a positive, happy, strong state, then you won't have many problems. The remaining problems will be easily solved. If you're in a stressed state, you'll never get out of problems, and you'll never solve them. If a person is even a little bit spiritual, then you can try to do spiritual practices with them, such as meditation, so they will enter into a bright, joyful state and understand that the problems are made up. What if the person really has problems? Anna wondered. You can't solve them just by realizing that? In fact, 99% of problems are imaginary, he replied with a smile. They do not exist. Only 1% of problems are real. So you mean that all these problems are only in our mind? The woman asked again, taking the master's words with a pinch of salt. Could you give us an example? Yes, in one's head, the guardian of knowledge affirmed. One thinks up a problem and suffers. For example, a woman cannot give birth. Her body has an infertile condition. She is told, look, you have to give birth to observe the formalities, otherwise you won't be happy. And she begins to worry. She starts to get herself worked up, and she feels inferior. But her infertility is not really a problem. She is just indoctrinated that everyone should be like that, but she has an individual case. What kind of problem is that? That's not a problem. It's okay to be happy, to be in a positive state of mind. There's an interesting life going on around her, a lot of good things happening. But no, this woman sits down and begins to feel sorry for herself, begins to suffer, and complains to everyone. As a matter of fact, in this case, does society impose this problem on the person? Anton said, half-questioningly, looking at the sage. The master smiled warmly as he met the young man's gaze. Like most problems, he stated with a faintly transparent sadness. If one understands that the problem was indoctrinated, that one was made to be unhappy, then the problem disappears, because it was made up, imposed on us from the outside. If a person understands this, then they can laugh at this problem, exaggerate it, do laughter meditation, and that's it. The person feels good and happy. The sage looked around at everyone in the hall and stopped his gaze at an insistently raised hand. It was Zlata's, who actively participated in the conversation. The student wanted to ask one more question, which arose in her mind during the conversation, since the sage's answers clarified the consciousness as much as possible and opened access to new layers of knowledge. Great Guardian, today you spoke much about the lessons of God. Explain, please. The student began her question. If the world is our mirror, and if the woman I invite to the class says that she has many problems and cannot come, what is the lesson for me? You have to think about it and figure out what is being mirrored here. God lets you meet a person who is busy with some problems. So you have to ponder, maybe I'm not really going to God either. Maybe I also invent problems for myself. Don't I have the same condition? If you look at yourself critically, you might realize how many hallucinations and problems are created that aren't really there. All of this distracts you from God. keeps you from going to him, just like this woman who is not going to class. If you have dealt with these hallucinations, it will be easy for you to drive them away from yourself. And if you can't, then take some haloperidol so you won't hallucinate. Whimsical sparks flashed in the master's eyes. He continued smiling merrily and explained, "They give such medicine to the mentally ill so they won't hallucinate. They say it helps." The joke the sage told came at a moment no one was expecting, which increased the comic effect immensely. The students laughed, realizing that this was part of the therapy, that it was through laughter that one could get rid of complexes and imaginary problems more quickly and easily. "That's it," continued the guardian when the wave of laughter had ebbed. "We laughed at ourselves, and the hallucinations disappeared. Then we realized how to help a person. If we understand that, then we have learned God's lesson. We have to explain to this woman that her problems are imaginary, that they are not real. When she attends the class, she can enter a positive state. Through dance, laughter meditation, acting out problematic situations in theater, and exaggerating her delusions, she will see that there really is no problem. She will understand that she can be in a joyful light state right now, that she doesn't have to wait for some contrived problems to be solved. If, indeed, a person enters deeply into this state, she will realize, I don't need problems. They don't exist. I will just be in this good state. I will be happy. I will tune in properly to life. Then I will always be in a good, strong state. These silly problems will simply not exist for me." This is the kind of mirror a person should see. The students received the master's words with warm smiles. By the end of the talk, a special atmosphere arose in the hall. The students were in a state of fullness, their faces shining, illuminated by a bright inner light. The sage smiled and began to recite the lines of a spiritual poem. Do we really care about the past? We cannot help it anymore. It all is left behind. Why should we blame ourselves for it? Why do we have to wonder what will happen? All that's just empty dreams. What is past and what is to come are just the flowers of spring and autumn. I know there are no divisions. There is no time for our heart. Let's put aside the dreams of vain vigils. Let us see who we are now. We will live the real day in the present and today. Do we care about the last year's leaves? Do we need the illusion of the future?
In our extreme times, when the fate of the entire planet is at stake, it is crucial for the knowledge of angels and benevolent spirits to spread as quickly as possible, globally, and reach thousands of people. In this way, we can change the future of all humanity. Which is why we are addressing you, dear soul of light. Spread the knowledge about our wise books and films. Share links to videos or cartoons. All of this is available and free. Invite women to individual practices, webinars, and seminars. And the Great Spirit of Light will help you and your family. It will direct an enormous amount of energy to fulfill all your desires. Benevolent spirits and angels will assist you and your loved ones in all matters. A thread of light and love extends from your heart to the hearts of thirsty women, and the creation of good and the dissemination of enlightened knowledge throughout the world begins. Become part of the mission of light. Help people, and God will help you.